Hello, and welcome to A Reader's History of Science Fiction. I'm Alex Howe, and this is Season 2, Episode 9, Catch-Up Episode Number 4, Horror. More specifically, like I did in the first catch-up episode, I want to look at two sci-fi horror stories in particular. First, an older story that is considered a classic of sci-fi, but I didn't get a chance to talk about in Season 1, The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. And second, a new story from my program of catching up on the pandemic-era movies I missed, Jordan Peele's newest sci-fi horror, Nope. This is the first of a 3-episode miniseries featuring horror stories that I'm doing for the month of October, so strap in for more spooky content. Also, major spoilers for Nope if you haven't seen it yet. To start off, John Wyndham was the author of 2 other books I have talked about before, The Day of the Triffids, itself something of a horror story, and what may be the first young adult dystopia, The Chrysalids. The Midwich Cuckoos is his other really famous work, which, like The Day of the Triffids, also deals with an alien invasion, but in more of an invasion of the body snatchers kind of way. And, like The Chrysalids, also deals with telepathic children, but in a much more sinister way. As you will know if you've been listening to this podcast up till now, The Midwich Cuckoos is better known by the title used for the movie adaptations, Village of the Damned. In fact, it was adapted to the big screen twice. The 1960 British version, starring George Sanders, and the 1995 John Carpenter version with Christopher Reeve and Kirstie Alley. Also, apparently there was a British miniseries made of the book under the Midwich Cuckoos title earlier this year. I had no idea that was going on, although it apparently abandoned the platinum blonde look. Anyway, the Midwich Cuckoos was of course named for the cuckoo birds, which hide their eggs in the nests of other birds, based on the aliens having a similar method for infiltrating our world. At the beginning of the book, the entire village of Midwich, England, falls unconscious at the same time. It only lasts for 1 day, but when they wake up, every woman of childbearing age is somehow pregnant. When the children are born, it's clear that they're not human. Much like in the movies, they have platinum blonde hair, silvery skin, and golden eyes. Also, they grow twice as fast as normal children. The boys and the girls each have their own group mind, and they can stop any threats to them using mind control. When confronted by the military, the children make a rather suspicious demand for airplanes, ostensibly to take them to a remote location where they can live in peace, but who knows if that's what they really wanted. Luckily, before they can leave, one of the townsfolk manages to sneak a bomb past the children's defenses close enough to kill them. It's also revealed that similar incidents have happened in 4 other remote villages around the world, implying that humanity may have merely gotten lucky so far. To be honest, it's been a while since I read The Midwich Cuckoos, and I wasn't inspired enough to watch either of the movies, but I do remember enjoying it. Wyndham is a good writer, and all of his books came across pretty well to me. All of them carried a real weight of moral ambiguity and unsettling events, which is probably good for a horror story. From a quick look, the general consensus of critics seems to be that the story has aged well, with which I would agree. It's one of those rare stories that feels more relevant, not less, as time goes on, and the culture changes. That is, in an era of genetic engineering and with modern attitudes regarding sexual violence and reproductive rights, the social issues Wyndham subtly raises have become much more immediate in today's world. From what I've read, the new miniseries didn't particularly do much with this, but I would argue that the fundamentals are there in the original. It's not going to be in your face in a book from 1957, but there is some real depth to it. On the flip side, this year's big sci-fi horror story was Jordan Peele's Nope. So, Nope is the first Jordan Peele film I've seen. I didn't see Get Out or Us because those are more straight horror, although they do have sci-fi backstories. That's something that will be discussed at length in the next episode. But Nope is more clearly a sci-fi horror story, so I put it on my list. And again, spoilers to follow. Nope is about O.J. Haywood, short for Otis Jr., and his sister M, who are horse trainers for Hollywood who have fallen on hard times after their father was killed by a nickel that inexplicably fell out of the sky. As strange occurrences continue to happen on their ranch, they begin to notice a flying saucer circling around the area. But things take an even more dangerous turn when the saucer turns out not to be an alien spaceship, but a highly territorial flying predator that they name Jean Jacket, after a particularly stubborn horse. After some misadventures, they deduce that Jean Jacket eats anything or anyone who looks directly at it. When they realize what it is, the Haywoods make the dubious decision to use their experience with animal training to try to get photographs of the creature. Harder than it sounds because it interferes with electronics, in order to cash in on the discovery. Predictably, they nearly get killed in the process of pursuing the quote-unquote Oprah shot. So, here's the thing. Nope reminded me why I don't watch many horror movies. And it's probably not for the reasons you're thinking. There are no jump scares or anything like that. It just wasn't my style, and I think that may be something that's intrinsic to horror movies in general. The odd thing is, while I don't read much horror, I do appreciate a good written horror story. But horror movies don't really do it for me. For one, there are the slasher movies that are full of jump scares, and I don't like jump scares. There are the really bloody horror films like Saw, and I don't care for really bloody stuff. Nope wasn't either of those, except for the one shower of blood scene. Then there are the more action-oriented horror films like zombie films and other monster movies, and those are alright, although I don't tend to go out of my way for them. And then there are the psychological horror movies. And admittedly, I'm not as familiar with these, but from the few I've seen, I just don't get them. By that, I mean I felt the same way about Nope that I did about Annihilation. Slow, too quiet, full of awkward silences. Granted, I thought Nope was considerably better than Annihilation. The second half is pretty good. But that said, the second half is also much more traditional action-oriented, where Annihilation keeps its mind-bending weirdness going all the way to the end. And with something like that, there are aesthetic elements in there to appreciate, both visual and narrative, but they don't come together for me on the screen like they do in print for someone like Lovecraft or Ballard. Maybe I need to read the book of Annihilation for comparison. Nope does better in this regard, but it has a lot of the same pitfalls in the first half of the film. Also, I still don't understand what the point of Jupe's backstory with Gordy was. I mean, I get it, I see the symbolism, but I feel like it doesn't add anything to the plot. Even so, I will give one special compliment to the special effects in this movie. Unlike a lot of monster movies, in Nope, we go through most of the movie with Jean Jacket being fairly visible in broad daylight, and also looking like a silly 1950s style flying saucer, and deliberately so. When used properly, that still comes off as pretty ominous, but it's kind of underwhelming as a movie monster in this age of massive spectacle, something that the film may be commenting on, so it's starting to get kind of meta here. But at the end, when Jean Jacket unfurls into its full jellyfish-like form, it is magnificent. It's like a deep-sea jellyfish, it's like a sailing ship, it's like a biblical angel all in one. It's scary for the rest of the movie, but when it reveals its final form, it's beautiful, and all the more terrifying. It's made out of nothing but silk sheets, and yet it feels like a true force of nature, not just a creepy creature. That final sequence is where the movie truly shines. Now, one last aside about psychological horror. I talked about it feeling slow and aimless, but that's not universal. You can have fast-paced psychological horror. I actually think of Alfred Bester's The Demolished Man as a classic example. It's not horror as a whole, but the ending, where Ben Reich is running around frantically, growing more and more unhinged as the world disintegrates around him, is classic psychological horror that isn't slow and quiet at all. I can't think of any examples offhand that lean that way wholesale. Like I said, I'm not that big a horror fan, so I'd have to really dig into it. But it does demonstrate that there is a wider range for this kind of thing than I've discussed here. So you can look into that for yourself. This has been A Reader's History of Science Fiction. This podcast is hosted by Libsyn and is available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find me on YouTube at Science Meets Fiction, on Twitter at SciMeetsFiction, and my website, sciencemeetsfiction.com. And once again, I've written myself into a corner where I only have 2 works to choose from for a recommendation. And worse, it's in a subgenre that I'm less familiar with. My inclination is to recommend the Midwich Cuckoos, but that's with a big asterisk. And that asterisk is that I've just gone on a lengthy digression about how psychological horror films don't really work for me. If you're more of a horror movie buff, you'll probably like Nope just fine. But this is my personal opinion. In the next episode, I have something special prepared. This podcast will have its first ever panel interview. For the second October episode, we will be talking about Stephen King and his role in science fiction. And since I haven't really read any Stephen King, I invited two Stephen King scholars to talk about him, Simon Brown of Kingston University and Regina Hansen of Boston University. We just did the interview this week, and it was a lot of fun, so you'll want to stick around for that. Thanks for listening.